Lightning just got shot. Bullets passed through cloth just fine, and she was still in the middle of a front flip behind it when they fired.
Quite a few hours in, and I honestly deem it the weakest Final Fantasy game.
Final Fantasy XIII's finally come out.
A few moments later.
So yeah, Final Fantasy XIII has some issues. Let's talk about how to fix them. You see, while I hardly think that the complete package is a masterpiece, I would argue any day of the week that Final Fantasy XIII has more than a few redeeming qualities. A popular thing to do nowadays on the internet, especially with the advent of YouTube, is sensationalism. It's not enough to dislike something, you have to absolutely hate it and hope it burns in the pits of hell for all time. And conversely, if you love something, it can do no wrong and it's immaculate in every sense. Nuance is something that's quickly evaporating into a thing of the past, so it's only natural that a game like Final Fantasy XIII and its legacy would have the Final Fantasy player base completely split as to its shortcomings and its merits. The goal for today's discussion will be how to fix a lot of the primary gripes of Final Fantasy XIII while not completely changing its themes and structures beyond recognition. To tackle this, we'll break this down into 3 primary sections that the overall populace seems to have almost universal gripes with, except well for Mitsu.
There's something wrong psychologically. Something has happened.
The 3 sections that we'll be analyzing will be the following: characters, combat, and story. Okay, so to kick us off, let's start with the characters of Final Fantasy XIII. And you know what? I think they're actually pretty okay. Not great, not terrible, serviceable. I've seen worse offenses in the Final Fantasy series, and in my most recent playthrough, I grew to appreciate the cast in a way I just wasn't able to previously. Maybe it's because I now have access to a fully formed frontal lobe. So let's start off by talking about what they did well when it comes to characters. I think that most of the characters' main driving motivation and personal stakes throughout the story is realistic and easily digested to the average RPG player, with the exception of maybe Vanille. Lightning is living with the regret of how she treated and abandoned her sister in her time of need, Snow is trying to be the hero for Sarah and others in the face of overwhelming odds, Saz and his son, you get the idea. All of them have genuine stakes on the line, and that helps provide a true emotional core for the players as you continue your playthrough. But by the end of the game, it feels like we barely know these people. They feel more like an idea than actual real life characters, and I think part of this starts with the naming scheme. Lightning, Hope, Fang, Snow. Why are we using everyday nouns to describe 66% of the playable cast? And yes, I know Lightning's real name is Claire, but you understand where the sentiment goes. This is the beginning of a very subtle disconnect within the characterization of Final Fantasy XIII. The entire roster feels like someone created character tropes and the skeleton of an arc to be completed throughout the game, but never went back and actually filled in the blanks. Let's take Snow for an example, a character I hate for completely separate reasons outside of this game. In my first playthrough when I first touched the game, I thought this was such a whack-ass character. His constant bravado and overly chipper demeanor just felt so forced to me, I just absolutely hated it. But now I've grown to appreciate his approach to being strong in the face of certain doom and being the one that puts on a strong front for others. However, that fit, bro, that fit has to be one of the worst in all of Final Fantasy.
I'll be crying if I look like that too, bro. That's fucked up what they be doing to y'all.
But at least he got a major glow up by the end of the trilogy. And the shame of it all is that Snow's arc starts off as one of the strongest in the game. Seeing the flashbacks and his decision to propose to Sarah and to protect her when she becomes branded really is some certified lover boy shit. I was all in, I was invested, I was Team Villiers. But then his entire arc is literally iced for several chapters until you meet back up with them at Palampolum, and by that time all the hype I had regarding his journey to get wifey back had completely dissipated. This is something that happens to almost every character in this game. They reach their crescendo of their character arc really early on, and that's pretty much it for them for the rest of the journey. They might have one more character moment, and then they become complete NPCs save for Fang and Lightning, who arguably have the best arcs in the entire game. So how do we fix it? So I actually think it's okay to split the party up early on. I know there's been a lot of complaints about that, but the main focus here should be to quickly bring them back together. Instead of having 2 pairs of characters do 2 different chapters separately, we should trim this down to just 1 chapter each, and they should all come together at Palampolum and lead the assault on Daisley in unison. This would allow you to have access to the characters of your choosing early on instead of waiting to chapter 9. This will also alleviate some of the pacing with the character arc issues and give them much more time to develop interpersonal relationships as a group in a believable manner that can be further explored in subsequent chapters. Now let's talk about Old Man Saz. This character was literally made for me. Single black dad, I am the target audience. And every single time I play this game, I walk away more and more both confused and on my most recent outing just flat out annoyed. Zaz starts the game off as the older pragmatist of the group. From his first encounter with lightning and throughout the story, he is the worrywart, the pessimist of every plan. Now I can relate to this even if I consider myself to be more of a pragmatist than a doomer like Zaz is. He's a lone member of the group that was actually willing to straight up just turn himself into authorities because he rationalized this would help his son. As misguided as this is, I can't help but respect that. Like his other peers, his character arc starts off strong, but all promise falls short by the time the credits roll. At some point throughout the journey, he loses all agency as the elder statesman of the group and just becomes flat out comedic relief. Why is he the only one that can get on this monster here? Now I've always personally appreciated when RPGs give us an old head in the party to dispense sage advice and to guide the younger generation with the wisdom they've accrued over the years. See Galuf, Cid, Orin, Fusoya, they've done this before many times with great results in the past, but here it just comes up short on every front. Also, as an aside, Square Enix, it's time to stop giving black characters a gun challenge. So how can we fix this? This one is actually pretty simple. I think a lot of the gripes I have for his character development will be assuaged by having other cast members other than Vanille to bounce off of. Having two polar opposites only really works for a certain period of time, and him having access to the entire party would allow him to use his wisdom to guide the party early on. Also, I think his big moment when Dodge is turned into Crystal should be witnessed by the full team. This would add some additional fuel to their fire and help them understand Saz's motives even clearer. I think that Saz should actually be one of the characters hit the hardest when he finds out the corruption regarding the fallacy in Eden. He's depicted as a straight and narrow everyday citizen who at the beginning of the journey believes things like the Purge are necessary evils to keep Cocoon safe. He should have something very much akin to how Wakka felt in Final Fantasy X when he discovers the entire Yevon religion is completely corrupt from the inside out. This would help definitely sell his character development to me in a more believable manner. And that leads us to the biggest issue character-wise, Vanille. I honestly think she's in contention for being one of the worst Final Fantasy characters of all time. And it's a shame because her character arc actually has a lot of potential. Her character arc is one of regret for not being able to do what needed to be done in the first war against Cocoon years ago. Her entire arc revolves learning to forgive herself and to find the strength to do what needs to be done to save her newfound friends. And again, this doesn't sound bad at all on paper, but the execution is just what's flat out poorly handled. First off, having her as a narrator is quite dreadful due to one main reason. Her voice performance is really something else, and not in a good way.
Vanille, where are you?
Glad that's over.
Now I'm aware that this was actually dictated to her from her handlers over at SE, but some of this is just really loony.
That my character beat, the producers were saying we want her to sound Japanesey. So whereas the other characters sound quite normal, my voice is pitched really high and I'm very squeaky and upbeat and peppy.
After you've reached around the midway point of the game, you either firmly will be in the love it or hate it camp. You either will love her performance or you'll hate it. She really only exists to make Fang's character arc that much more impactful and to give her the motivation during the journey, and in that context, she's excellent. However, making her the narrator always really seemed like a bit of a stretch. Does this game actually really need a narrator? So how do we fix this? First off, scrap her as a game's narrator. Her dialogue never felt like it extended any type of emotional impact or gravitas at any point. It does provide some sly foreshadowing, but that's about the extent of it. Secondly, let's give this girl some agency. She's mostly a passive player in the game's events. I think if we can get her to the crux of her character arc sooner and have her tell Fang about the truth of her past, we can use the remainder of the game with her making the decision to save Fang instead of the other way around. What if she was the one at the end of the game that single-handedly saved Fang while she was being tortured from Orphan, and out of sheer desperation, she's the one that turns into a solo Ragnarok? Now, I'll definitely admit I don't have all the answers when it comes to how to fix the Vanille issue, but these are just a few ideas that come to mind when I contemplate her character arc. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. In closing for the character section, I think that Lightning and Fang's arcs are definitely the best in the game, and I really wouldn't tweak them too much. Hope, however, is another contentious topic. I actually like this arc, to be quite honest. Dealing with the loss of his mother and finding the strength to forgive Snow for her death weirdly worked for me. I mean, he's a kid after all. I think when people start lobbing complaints about Hope, they forget this kid's like supposed to be 14 or 15 or something like that. He's a kid. He's gonna be whiny and unsure of himself and emotional. All that makes sense to me. And watching him find the Hope that he was named after is one of the best parts of the narrative for me. So I really wouldn't tweak that too much. So moving on to part 2, the battle mechanics. It really has not aged well. I imagine at some points early in the development of Final Fantasy XIII, the main goal of this title was to be a grand visual experience and to remove as much friction as possible when it came to having the player being able to move throughout the narrative. And a direct casualty of this is definitely the battle system, which is honestly just downright baffling in certain ways. It's simultaneously way too easy to manage your characters throughout most battles, but you never have the ability to apply precision at any point, especially when you need it the most. I can only imagine when they sat down to design this game, they wanted a way to streamline the admittedly somewhat intimidating gambit system of Final Fantasy XII, which I think outside of FF7 Remake is actually the best in the series. Yes, I will die on this hill. But instead of an evolution to the gambit system, in many ways what we got was regression. You no longer have the ability to freely control all 3 characters at ease, and the AI's decision making has to be trusted to an almost absurd degree. You get control of your party leader and that's about it. The simplicity comes at a cost of almost any player expression in battle and causes a gulf with the player's risk-reward relationship. Now, one of the best things that came out of this game's battle system was the stagger mechanic, which has had an absolute chokehold on Final Fantasy ever since. However, it presents its own host of unique issues within the gameplay of Final Fantasy XIII. To start with, most casually encountered enemies are way too tanky and take an immense amount of time to kill. It felt like they spent so much time and energy developing the stagger system that they wanted to implement it non-stop. Not every encounter needs to revolve around staggering the opponent just to be able to perform meaningful damage, and after the first few hours of gameplay, with certain opponents it becomes a pure exercise in tedium. So how do we fix this? First off, let's be able to change our party leader when we'd like to. This alone fixes so many issues that it's scary that it took until the game's direct sequel for this to be implemented. This 100% should have been patched in the game. And moving on, now I understand why they would want to keep the nice, neat nature of the paradigm system, but what if we could implement something like a sub-priority system for each role? Like for medic, instead of just healing as a priority, the first priority will always be clearing debuffs, or for commando, the sub role will always be to hit the enemy with the lowest health. Now that's just a basic premise, but the potential is endless to greatly improve the battle system of this game. Also, make summons actually do something. I don't know what's been going on with summons since Final Fantasy X, but ever since that game, they've had the weirdest implementation ever and have largely been useless outside of some gems like Zeramis and Zodiark in FF12. To start with, I think that their damage should more closely scale with your current damage threshold. It should be more fine-tuned. If they're on the field, it should feel like a better party member, right? If you're hitting 9999, they should be hitting the same amount with every attack. Or do something like unique buffs or something like that. They're just too vanilla in this game, even though they are quite pleasing to look at. Now in closing, this isn't necessarily the battle system, but they have a one-to-one relationship, the Crystarium. Please remove the artificial level caps in each section. If a player wants to go off and grind, they should be rewarded for it. This is true for almost every other Final Fantasy title, and it's really odd that this is present in this title. I literally just got done playing Crisis Core, I did mad grinding, and guess what? I was able to just pretty much solo the end of the game. That's your reward for sinking in hours. That's the way RPGs work. I don't understand the level cap here. And to bring us home, we have part 3, the story. The story of Final Fantasy XIII, you know the saying, critically acclaimed? Well, it's the opposite of that. It really is as messy as a night shift in a Waffle House on a Saturday night. From the word go, the game starts throwing phrases at you that are extremely important to the game, but not really explained at all.
Check this out though. First of all, you throwing too many big words at me.
Without looking it up right now, can you tell me the difference between a l'Cie and a fal'Cie? For about 95% of people that played this game, the answer is no. That's like people playing through Final Fantasy VII and still not having an understanding of Jenova and the Ancients by the conclusion of the game. They keep up this constant flurry of word soup throughout the game, and their expectation is that you gather any additional information by the way of the game's data log. Pro tip to any developers out there, don't do that. I can assure you that the vast majority of players will never even stop to glance at it and will still be expecting to have these ideas and phrases explained to them at some point throughout the game. It really is just gutter tier level storytelling and world building. Now, as far as the story, it's actually pretty decent all things considered. A race against the clock to defy fate from the game's opening chapter is a very interesting premise. But again, I think the execution is where things really go awry. There is a good story here underneath all the one-dimensional characters and arguably the worst antagonist in the mainline series. Space Pope really is just the worst. Now, I've seen some people out here trying to rehabilitate this man's image, saying he's some 40 chess god, but he's really not. He falls victim to the same issue every other character in Final Fantasy XIII has. It's extremely hard to care about them or their motivations. Characters are introduced, killed off, reintroduced, and killed off again in less than 15 minutes. Like my guy, y'all did Sid Reigns absolutely filthy. You have to fight him with the team, he dies in what I consider to actually be a very satisfying conclusion to an admittedly very short arc. Then y'all bring him back and kill him off in the matter of 5 whole minutes.
You're a victim.
What did this man do to the writing team to deserve to be treated this badly? Even characters like the Cavalry are given lackluster conclusions to their story. I guess they're Seath now? Even characters we're supposed to like Team Nora, are given zero characterization at all. Think of Biggs and Jesse in Avalanche. They're given more to work with in their short screen time than any of these Goombas. So how do we fix this? First off, we need a true big bad. Both Sid and Bartandela suck ass, that's just the reality of it. I think that by giving either of them more screen time would make for a compelling villain, and if I had to lean in one way or another, I would definitely pick Sid. Him initially being presented to us as a helping hand, and with us throughout the entire journey, hell, maybe even make him a playable guest character. Then having him forced to betray the party on Orphan's order near the end of the game would create more of a tragic backdrop and a more satisfying conclusion to his arc, as opposed to Darth Sidious Jr. over here, who is constantly guiding the party and their path, but he never once feels intimidating or shows any type of genuine connection to our heroes. The major goal for any antagonist should be to create an escalating and riveting conflict with our heroes. They should make you want to boot up the game at 3 AM just to take that guy down. And despite 3 separate encounters in his game, I still felt absolutely nothing by the time he was slayed for the final time. Now this could be fixed in a number of ways potentially. Either give him a more detailed backstory with his growing frustration regarding Orphan and the paradigm between humanity and the fal'Cie, or by giving him a direct connection to one or more different cast members. Maybe he was a fal'Cie of their homeland, or maybe one of the party members worked closely with him in the government, literally anything. This lack of a direct connection severely hinders his ability to be a truly menacing presence throughout the playthrough. He just becomes a bad guy that needs to be slayed. Quite disappointing. Honestly, either bad guy could be salvaged and have a decent character arc, but they definitely need the most attention out of all the characters. You know, the antagonists in this game are just dreadful. But honestly, they just needed more attention in the writing room to be much more effective and to live up to their peers in the Final Fantasy mythos. And to wrap us up for the story, the game just needs more interaction overall. More towns, more depth, more interactions. Being shuffled from one location to the next without really being able to ever interact with the populace really hinders the overall experience and makes Final Fantasy XIII feel alien in comparison to the fully fleshed out worlds like Spira, Ivalice, Midgar. So what I'm saying is, despite this being a race against time, the game needs to slow down and let us breathe in this world and its inhabitants. The way that the narrative is laid out does such a great disservice to the world of Cocoon, Pulse, everything. I feel like there's a lot of potential that they have there. Of course, this is mined more in the sequels, but it would have been great to have that available for just the first time players of Final Fantasy XIII. And with that, that'll do it for us. These are the ways I would fix Final Fantasy XIII, but more importantly, I want to hear what you guys have to say down in the comments. How would you fix Final Fantasy XIII? What are your major gripes, and what would you do to fix them? But if you enjoyed the video, make sure you subscribe. Till next time, LC signing out. Peace.